Let's talk about key signature versus tonal center and why tonal center wins every time. Just kidding. We'll use adjectives instead to describe tonal center as being more broad and more expansive than key signature. Now, key signature derives from two things, two scales. The major scale or Ionian mode, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, or the minor scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, te, do, whole, half, whole, half, whole, whole, and they apply mostly to music notation. Now, music notation, notes on a page, writing, composition, or reading, playing music and reading it off of a page. It doesn't only apply to notation in theory and in the ether of music as well, if you're thinking about that while you're playing, which I mostly don't recommend that you do. Now, some people refer to the term key center, which I'm not so familiar with. We didn't study it in college, or I didn't hear it in school, but we did talk about tonal center, which again I think is more broad and more expansive. Key center does apply to the center of the key signature that you're in, but is less expansive than tonal center. Now let's say you're at an open jam. Let's say it's a blues jam, and you got your guitar and you go up on stage and the bass player's there and he's the one running the show, and you ask him, hey, what key are we in? And he says G. And then you say to him, well, G what? So he could respond a few ways. There's actually quite a few ways he could respond. He could say G major or G minor. Does he mean G major as in G Ionian scale, or the key of G major, or G Aeolian, or the key of G minor? Now you can either be in the key of G major or G minor and not necessarily play all of the notes in that scale. So you can have this option of G major, G minor, but it goes way beyond that. And now we're going to dip into tonal center. So if you're at the blues jam and the cat says, I'm in G major, but maybe he's not as educated as you are. So you're going to say G major. Do you mean major scale, or do you mean the key of G major using the 1, 4, and 5 as major chords, the Roman numeral harmonic analysis? Or does he mean G7, like a dominant chord? And in that case, if that's your one chord, we've now broken the rules of traditional classical music theory. Thank the gods we did, because we wouldn't have modern jazz era, which is what we are still living in. So now that we've learned that there's an option outside of a major or a minor key applying to a key center of a key signature, we can realize that, take this for example, say we're at a funk jam and we're just playing in G7 and we just have one groove. And that's it. That's the whole song for 20 minutes. It's just a beautiful vamp that has this great pocket groove. The bass player doesn't go anywhere but the G. Nobody plays anything but a G7 chord. That's what the band has agreed to play. People dance their asses off, and it's a jolly good time. Now, we've crossed into the world of tonal center. What is our tonal center? Well, our tonal center can be a few things. It can be a note, or it can be a bunch of notes, a chord. In this case, G7. So you have the option, especially in the modern day jazz era, which is funk, rock, reggae, jam band, everything past jazz basically in the modern era that's not considered classical. You can play Mixolydian scale, you can even force a Dorian scale over that, you can play chromatic scale, you can play whatever you want, and the tonal center will kind of shift. Let's go back to the idea that everybody is just playing a G7 chord, right? That's your tonal center. Is it a scale? No, it's a chord. Could you superimpose scales on top of that? Absolutely, but let's try to stay focused on just the one chord. All right, getting away from the modal funk jam, and I do want to talk about modes for just a second. Modal music has several different definitions. There was modal music back in the, 11 or 1200s or something like that, Gregorian chant days, Middle Ages, I don't even know. I'm not a big music history person. Modes at the time were only 4 notes or 5 notes. So that's a bit of a wake-up call for the modes conversation. Now, modal music happened in the Miles Davis era, and it happened in the classical era in the late 1800s, I believe. And there's also modal music that happened in the 16 and 1700s. And then the original modal music, which is totally different, which has like 12 modes, which are only 4 and 5 notes, happened in the Gregorian chant days and possibly even before that. Let's talk about Miles Davis's So What. You're playing this Dorian groove. Now, it's the key signature of C major, but it's the tonal center of D Dorian. So a mode can absolutely be a tonal center, right? It can expand beyond key signature, even though you are in a key signature. You can have one note, you can have multiple notes, you can have 12 notes that be a tonal center. Let's look at A minor pentatonic scale. Now that doesn't apply to any key per se, because it could apply to several keys. Now if you go down to the fifth mode of that, and I like to call pentatonics modes because they don't just apply to the box shapes on the guitar, they apply to the human voice or theremin or trumpet or trombone or any other instrument. Pentatonic scale mode 5 that goes 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. You've broken the rules of traditional classic music theory that mainly has a major key or a minor key. Sometimes in a minor key they'll use harmonic minor scale to get that extra bit of tension on the 5 or the 7 chord, or sometimes the 3 chord. Now that scale can be a tonal center in itself, right? And it doesn't apply to the traditional rules of a major or a minor key, right? And you can make tons of beautiful music, good music, profitable music, workable music, danceable music, enjoyable, listenable music. Now why I think this is great is it expands your composition and your improvisational ability, which is really brought to us by the jazz era and the improvisation that had been explored throughout. I hope this inspires you to both compose and improvise outside of the box of either a major or a minor key. You can play modally and consider that a tonal center. You can play anywhere from 1 to 12 notes and consider that a tonal center. Or you can play a chord and consider that a tonal center. That's my opinion. That's what I learned in school. And I'm sticking to it. I like it. I think it's broad. I think it's expansive. And I think it's a great way to express art, which should not have limitations. And that's something else I wanted to talk about. I think key signature and key center of said key signature is a limiting thing. I mean, there's lots to do in there, so it's not totally limiting. But tonal center brings about new genres, brings about new flavors. You can even limit yourself by playing less notes, which expands your tonal center. Even though those specific notes could exist in the key signature, and you could write them that way, that doesn't necessarily mean that the tonal center has to be that key signature. The other thing I wanted to talk about with both key signature, key center, and tonal center is what your one is. The feeling of the one. What note or chord you generally start on and end on in either a piece or a phrase in a piece of music. That is typically what people refer to as the one, especially in that kind of blues or funk jam setting. They say, hey, what's the one? And that's all I need. And then they can go about their day playing whatever they want. Because in modern day, we get to be free-flowing with really the chromatic scale. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it if you'd like. Take care.